Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Today's podcast is Lest with a T, we forget -historical. And today we are going to talk about boundaries, not just border boundaries, but other type of boundaries that we as humans have set up as physical, mental, religious borders that encourages us to do bad things. And today's host is Lisa Skinner, Betsy Orzel with a Z, and Lillian Cauldwell, whose mouth isn't coordinating with her lips or tongue. So we will start first with Lisa Skinner, who will give you an update on the border and immigrant situation here in the United States. Lisa, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being here with us for another episode of Lest We Forget -historical. I don't think you all can see me because I think my camera has failed me. Hopefully you are hearing me okay. But because we did an episode on the border crisis just in the last month, and there has been some recent updates to that border crisis, we thought we would start off today giving you an update on the border crisis as it stands. So this information that I'm sharing with you today was as recent as September 26th of this year. And we are being told that today the House Committee on Homeland Security released the August, and they're calling them startling statistics, showcasing over 300,000 border encounters nationwide, which is a new all-time record under President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas under their watch. At the center of this crisis, the southwest border has now experienced a 100%, yes, you're hearing that correctly. They are experiencing a 100% increase in encounters compared to all of last fiscal year. And there is still 1 month left in the fiscal year of 2023. The post-Title 42 strategy has failed, according to this updated information. With nearly 1.6 million known, what they're calling gotaways, and hundreds of thousands of inadmissible aliens granted parole every month through the cartel exploited CBP app and other mass patrol programs, this open border is only enriching transnational criminal organizations and allowing them to expand their reach under the border and the country. So now communities across the country, from border patrol towns like Del Rio and Yuma to big cities like New York and Chicago, guess what? They are being left to pick up the pieces of this continuing crisis. Former Obama administration Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson once described a border crisis as more than 1,000 aliens encounters per day. In August of this year, alien encounters at the southwest border averaged around 6,000 per day. The truth of this crisis is clear to the American people, but unfortunately, we don't know how many dangerous illegal aliens are actually entering the country undetected, especially as Border Patrol agents are being pulled off the front lines to help process and release the mass amounts of illegal aliens flooding our borders. This crisis continues to be a threat to our homeland security, and homeland Republicans are demanding accountability. So one of the things that is a recent update that has just occurred in the last probably week, I'd say, is that the Biden administration is now doubling down on their strategies to contain migration as unauthorized border crossings surge across the Southwest. The number of migrants apprehended in a single day by the U.S. Border Patrol has now approached an estimated 9,000 people on this past Wednesday, according to officials who declined to be identified to discuss preliminary data. Rural areas of southern Arizona, including the greater Tucson region, as well as South Texas, have seen large increases in migration. President Biden touted his immigration reform efforts Wednesday at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus dinner. At the event, Biden noted his request of $4 billion in additional funding for border security this year. And that was a figure that Republicans balked at. Now, the thing that makes this a little bit ironic, I'll say, is because if we all remember, one of Biden's promises during his electoral campaign is that he was dead set against the border wall that Mr. Trump ended up starting. Well, with these recent statistics really shedding a huge floodlight on the current situation of the number of immigrants who are trying to sneak into our country, Mr. Biden has changed his mind about that for a couple reasons. Most of the immigrants that are coming are Venezuelans, and they are coming to try to escape the poverty and the oppression that is happening to them in their country. So trying to seek refuge in the United States is certainly understandable, but the problem is we are not equipped to handle the number of people who would like to come and live in the United States. So with all this going on, Mr. Biden has realized that one of the solutions to this problem, and there's, it's very complicated. This is just one of the things that he has decided to do to try to tame the situation a little bit from the crisis that it's turned into, is to pick up where Mr. Trump left off and continue building the border wall. He sees that as one of the only viable solutions to this problem. And the other reason is because so many billions of dollars was appropriated to that project, and the money can't be spent anywhere else, that he says, okay, we've got the money to finish the wall. We have this huge problem. How we're handling it right now is not working. These just thousands and thousands of immigrants continue to come, and we are not, we don't have the resources available to us to control the number of people who want to come and seek refuge in the United States. So that is the updated information to the border crisis. It certainly is apparent that it's increasingly becoming worse, to the point where Mr. Biden has now realized that maybe the border wall wasn't such a bad idea after all, even though we know he doesn't support it or believe in it. But I think out of desperation, he may be seeing it as something that is a necessary evil to try to control this crisis that we are seeing currently at our U.S. borders. So that's the update for you. And, we will continue to update you as we gain more information via the news on how this crisis is playing out and moving forward. So thanks for listening to that update. I hope this has provided you with some really important information today. So I'm going to turn the microphone back over to Lillian, and she'll take it from here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for the update. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is something for you to consider as well. Immigration, boundary. So let me ask you a hypothetical question. What would you do if Mr. Trump won the electoral vote, not the popular vote, but the electoral vote, which would make him president, and he follows in the direction of his threats, saying that he will turn the government into authoritative dictatorship and commence his own cleansing program, which would mean that you, as US citizens, now become the immigrants who are leaving your country to seek asylum and other countries because, for whatever reason, religion, color, whatever, politics, you no longer feel safe in this country. How do you think the rest of the world would treat you if you came knocking at their back door asking to come in because of the tumultuous uprisings in your country? The reason
Lillian, I just want to interject something, because if our listeners remember, if they listened to our very first Lest We Forget series on the Holocaust, this is exactly what happened with the millions of Jews who were trying to escape the wrath of the Nazis and seek refuge in a safe place. And unfortunately,
they were denied. Yes, they were denied.
They were denied because FDR had decided, based on the court of popular opinion and otherwise the public, that they did not want to allow all these immigrants to come into our country because we were right in the throes of the Great Depression. So many people were without jobs, people couldn't find food, and they were so afraid that if we allowed all the Jewish people trying to flee the wrath of Nazi into our country, that it would just make a bad situation become so much worse. And what I'm hearing Lillian say right now, it's exactly what happened then. So now we definitely are seeing history repeating itself in a very similar crisis situation.
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, make no doubt about it, the Jews are going to be the first to be expelled. Mr. Trump has very mixed feelings about us. And most of his heroes are the bad guys. He idolizes the Korean dictator. He thinks what Putin is doing in Ukraine is just hunky-dory with him. Yes, no problems with it. He would probably join him to reclaim all the land that the Soviet Union, formerly known as Russia, would like to reclaim. Boundaries on countries are not physically fixed. It's something on a piece of paper. This morning, when I had to go and take my grandson to school, he unraveled a very old piece of paper that he created, and he showed me a map that he had drawn with the boundaries of the different states in the Union, because they're studying that in social studies. Only his map doesn't look like anything that we have now. And if you paid attention to PBS, they did a whole series about how the states in the US got their shapes. And you learned that the boundaries that were drawn for the states was more economic, political. So it wasn't really a physical manifestation of forts, of walls that enclosed each individual state. Now, in this country, we can go into any state and not have to bring a passport with us or other papers. That's not true overseas. So my question stands, what do you do if the unthinkable happens? How do you protect your borders? And you're considered an alien, which I find fascinating because, excuse me, but if a real alien came with those spaceships that everybody is so upset about, how do we tell them apart from the aliens that are trying to get into our country? Or anybody else's country for that matter? Would you have problems with an alien coming out of a spaceship and coming out and claiming this land for them? It's something to think about. Betsy, what do you think?
Well, I think I have a lot to say. The border crisis is a hot mess, became more of a hot mess with the Biden administration, who refused to acknowledge what was going on. And, people criticize Governor Abbott about shipping up the immigrants to other places. There was no more room. They couldn't do it anymore in Texas. Same thing with Arizona. They went up to Martha's Vineyard. What did those rich people do? They didn't want them. They got them out of there.
Yeah.
They only want them there to do their chores. Lawn mowing, landscaping, cooking, being nannies. They didn't want them living there. If they did, they would have had them there. Now, New York City, places around the country, in the US, I mean, they talk a big thing. Oh, we're sanctuary cities. The immigrants are welcome here. But then, hello, they realize reality. They can't afford it. They're sleeping out on the streets. They're taking over motels. They're kicking out other homeless people. They're kicking out veterans. We just can't afford it. Now, I'm very well aware what the Statue of Liberty says, but that was a whole other time ago. My grandparents came here as immigrants, both sets. But back then, somebody was responsible for them. They weren't on the government dole. Now they come, they're on the government dole. What other country can you go to where you get a phone, you get an apartment or a place, and food? Nowhere.
You can't. And if you're poor in this country and you can't prove to the government that you need this money, you know what they tell you? You have to go through every single one of your assets, whether they're in the bank or a home or a car, doesn't matter. And even then, you may be the wrong ethnicity or the wrong color. You don't think it happens? Back in the 70s, when I was down there with Ben, I could not get food stamps because I had a college degree. But in California, my first cousin got food stamps and he had 2 college degrees. So you tell me.
And also, we just can't afford it with the schools.
Yes, that's the big thing.
Who's going to teach these children? These people are coming in unvaccinated, unvetted. There are also cartel coming in. There are criminals coming in. We don't know who's coming in. We just don't know. The immigration process has to be improved somehow to be able to get your citizenship. It shouldn't be taking 4 or 5 years or however long it takes. They need to do a better job with that. But they just can't let this influence.
think about when your great great grandparents came over and we all had to go through Ellis Island before we were allowed to even step into the United States. You had to have a job waiting for you. You had to have somebody sponsoring you. So you really they had a lot more control over that than they do now.
One of the things that
I just sent you an email.
there she is. Oh, Lillian's back. Yay.
Yay, sorry about that. My connection just kind of like the
Destructed.
border problem. It kept me from crossing the border into the land of the living. But I am back now.
What I was starting to say, folks, was when I was doing research to update y'all on the current border crisis, I did want to just kind of piggyback on one thing that Betsy just said, and that is a lot of the reason, not just the number of immigrants that are trying to seek refuge in our country, but one of the reasons why they're calling it such a crisis is because along with all these immigrants, the drug cartels and the are coming in, and they're bringing their drugs, and they are kidnapping people, and they're raping women, and they are kidnapping girls and boys to use in the sex trade industry. So with the border quote unquote crisis, it's just not a simple problem of we don't have the resources to be able to take care of all the people who do want to flee to our country. But along with it, a lot of criminal activity is following, and we certainly don't want or need that. And I saw an interview recently at the border where a reporter was interviewing an immigrant who had successfully gained access into our country, and asked her why, she was from Venezuela, why would she leave Venezuela and take all those risks with all the criminal activity that they encounter along the way and the thousands of miles that they have to trek to get here? And her answer was a simple one: because it's better than where we came from. I think that is really huge food for thought. It's better than where we came from, but we don't even know what we're going to, but it's better than where we came from. I thought that was just a powerful, powerful thing to hear her say. And I think that probably rings true with all the other thousands and thousands of people that are trying to accomplish the same thing.
I think you're right. And we as American citizens have never had to experience such turbulence or upheaval in our own life.
No.
And so it is very difficult for us to understand that your country, your state, your city can get so bad. However, if you want to talk about fleeing from impossible places, remember when the suburbs first became a big deal and people started deserting the city to flee into the suburbs? And why were they going into the suburbs? Because of crime, because of the gangs, because of the bad schools, and because the economic situation was better. Well, let's face it, it was fresh, it was virgin woods, if you want to put it that way. Nobody had really conceptualized of going back into the country, more or less, than staying in the urban areas, which are cities. So there's a lot of parallelisms, if I may throw that out. But I think that people have to recognize that great social change, great industrial, technological change, and let's face it, people's greed and arrogance drive people to be on the move, to go to where they think they will have a better life. I mean, the Great Depression, Grapes of Wrath by Steinbeck, what was the book about? All these tenant farmers who had their farms closed down and mortgaged by the bank. They all went out to California because it was supposed to be a better life. But it didn't turn out to be that way. Is that a great parallel to the immigrants who are trying to get into this country, only to realize once they get here that they have exchanged one set of bad circumstances for another? If they're just in another place rather than remaining and staying in Venezuela. Betsy, what do you think?
I think that something's got to be done. I'm not smart enough for the answer, but
None of us are, but Washington isn't doing a great job either.
I just have to say a personal story. My grandmother, who came over from Russia before World War I, she came in illegally. She wasn't able to become a citizen because she was a caregiver, but she worked for everything. You know, they had to be sponsored by someone. Well, in 1976, my grandfather's sister came over from Russia. He paid money for years to get her over. So my grandmother couldn't take living with her, so she put her over in Brighton Beach, where a lot of Russian Jews are. When my great aunt died, they found, I think, almost $3,000 stuffed in toilet roll paper rolls. And my grandmother was mad because she said, I came to this country, I had to work for everything. Golda comes, she got an apartment, phone, everything. This is what people get angry about. And especially, and I don't care if people get mad, our veterans. Why aren't we taking care of our veterans? They should come first before anybody. They fought for this country. They, those who have died for this country. And there's a mental health crisis among veterans. And we need to take care of our vets. When vets are getting kicked out of places for illegals to come, that's not right. And you can send me all the hate mail you want. I really don't care, because that's how I feel. And I will not back down from how I feel. And
the other thing is, these immigrants have not fought for this country.
exactly.
They have not stood in the streets and become part of teams to try and prevent crime, or to keep kids from being kidnapped or traded in the white slave market, or prevent them from being attacked and having their childhood taken away from them. I know this seems harsh, but listen up, folks. You haven't paid to get into this country. You have not sacrificed something of yours to get entry into our country. And isn't that what most countries exact from other immigrants? I have friends in England who tell me that all the hotels are filled with immigrants. And we're not talking about the $3 or $4 hotels, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the Hiltons, the real Four Seasons, the real expensive ones. And I've also been told when these people leave, they trash the places in which they've been put up in. I've never been in a Four Seasons hotel. I can't afford $1,000 a night. Sorry, that's just out of my fixed income range. I've never been in the Hilton either, for that matter. Who has $400 to $500 a night to spend? And we're not even counting in room service yet. And these people get room service and the government picks it up. I think that while the Statue of Liberty is very nice, 100, 200 years ago, there weren't that many people in this country. Now we're bursting at the seams. We can barely feed the kids of citizens. How are we going to feed the kids of the immigrants? They have several programs going on TV. I'm sure everybody's seen them. Leave no kid hungry. And they show these middle-class kids whose parents cannot afford to provide them with a lunch. Now, back in the 60s, the Black Panthers provide lunches for kids coming out of the ghettos. But these are not kids that are coming out of the ghettos. These are middle-class kids where the parents are not able to keep up with inflation, and they cannot give these kids a decent meal to eat. Now, the object of the show is not to tell you all the bad things all the time, but to make you aware of what's creating these bad times, and then everybody putting their heads together and figuring out how we can solve these problems together. The people in
Lillian.
Washington are our representatives. Maybe you should encourage them to represent us. Yes,
The
Betsy.
people who used to donate to the food banks now need those food banks.
Yes, that mostly it's middle America that kept the food banks going. And now that middle America needs this assistance, unless you are in a wealthy city or a wealthy suburb. Yes, it depends where you live. Let me give you a great example. I have a friend who used to live in a city called Boyertown, and it's a wonderful city. And when she went to pick up her food donations from the various churches, she got all kinds of stuff that even I can't afford to buy at the grocery store. Now she's moved to another city in Pennsylvania, but it's not as wealthy as Boyertown. You guessed it, the types of food items she receives: Campbell soup. They get very canned goods, Spam. Big difference of what she can receive in terms of food aid. And you know what she tells me, ladies and gentlemen? It's difficult for her to get food stamps because she's not an immigrant coming from Venezuela.
I think this is a really good example of how our country is continuing in the direction of the Great Divide, and how really deeply our socioeconomic stratosphere is splitting from one extreme to the other, because like Betsy and Lillian have pointed out, the people that used to volunteer at the food banks, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, are now the people that are what are being called food insecure. And they're now standing in line at these food banks trying to put food on their families' tables. So are we all seeing like something totally wrong with this picture today?
Yes. And if one looks at it very closely, again, there's a big parallelism between us and pre-World War II Germany. Germany was a wealthy country. It was an industrial country. And it was doing very well. Yes, they lost out on the World War One treaty, but the thing of the matter was it was still a wealthy nation. The United States is a wealthy nation. So
I'd
what are
also
we going
like
to
to
do?
I'd also like to just make one comment on a really important point that Betsy brought up in terms of, or in regard to our Vietnam vets. I personally feel that the way our Vietnam vets have been treated, and who knows the underlying reasons, is it embarrassment, is it shame, but I think it falls under the category of what this show is all about. And it's a true atrocity, the way these men have been just kicked to the curb, forgotten about. They have all kinds of psychological PSTD issues that they brought back from defending us, defending our country in a place that they didn't want to be. I think this really qualifies as a true atrocity. What do you ladies think?
Absolutely.
I agree. I mean, Agent Orange, the government refused to even recognize it as a chemical warfare weapon that affected most of the troops on the ground.
Well,
I
my
mean,
brother-in-law is a very good example of that. He's 72 years old. He was a Vietnam vet, and he has been dying from emphysema and COPD for the last 20 years. And he said that it was because he was exposed to Agent Orange when he was in Vietnam. That's what
and the
caused.
government has never taken responsibility for these people medically.
Yeah.
They said no, it doesn't exist. They have more empathy for the Vietnamese. And I just want to throw something in. I know it doesn't really have something to do, but I want our audience to think about it. Think of all the people who were Vietnamese who helped our government during the war. And it's just not in Vietnam, it's in Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan. And all these people, our government left to die.
Yeah.
Or not get the medical aid, or the kids who were begotten on their women by American soldiers who were taught it's okay to go to bed with these people because we have needs and they have to be met. That's the oldest atrocity in any war. It's not just the Americans, but it's something to think about. It is an atrocity.
Seems like we take better care of victims of other people's wars than we do of our own soldiers. I mean, that's kind of what I've seen throughout my
Yes.
existence as, on this earth, going through, 60 decades of watching history and studying history. It just, we've kind of joked on our show that Lillian named the show Lest We Forget, so we could make sure that people are aware of our history, and that hopefully we can keep a part of our history from continuing to repeat itself. But we've also joked that a lot of the situations that we see over and over and over again are not history repeating itself. It's history continuing to behave in the same manner that it has since the creation of mankind.
Human behavior, it hasn't changed, folks.
It hasn't. I mean, look what we're seeing with the current situation in Europe. Is that a good example of manifest destiny? If I ever saw one, and I honestly have to tell you, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, before I did the research on manifest destiny, when we were doing our genocide of the Native American population series, I had never heard of the term manifest destiny. I heard of it from Lillian, and when I went and researched it so I could educate our listeners about manifest destiny and realized what it was, now I'm seeing this human behavior occur everywhere. And I think it's in our DNA as human beings that we are wired to conquer and take and control. And we feel that we don't have a purpose in our life unless we're doing this. And it's everywhere. You ladies agree with that?
Yes, and so are the aliens in their
Yes.
spaceship. They're following manifest destiny as well. I know they have another terminology for it, and I probably cannot pronounce it in their language. But I suspect if we could communicate with the aliens from space, they would say the same thing.
So maybe we can't blame them. They're
Nope,
just waiting for the right time.
yes, I really, but I mean, if you take a look, man's behavior has not changed since we came down from the trees. Have you ever paid attention to the orangutans and the monkeys and the chimpanzees and the gorillas at the zoo? Pay attention, folks, because we are them.
Yeah.
We are animals. We like to call ourselves humans, but we are animals.
Well, I think one of the things that we've seen in our lifetime that really genuinely illustrates the point to what we're saying is the movie Planet of the Apes, where
Oh,
we blew
absolutely.
ourselves up, we destroyed ourselves, and then the apes.
And we brought in the apes to be our servants. I mean, that was the original concept. We enslaved them.
And then they
And they
turned
were
the
intelligent.
tables. And they
Yes.
turned the tables on us when
And
we
they turned the tables on us. And then the ironic thing is, I mean, talk about black comedy, they became us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the very last scene of that movie, you finally realize that they weren't on a different planet. They were on our planet. And the Statue of Liberty is halfway sticking out of the sand in the beach. And the guy realizes that, oh my God, we really did it to ourselves. This is Earth. This is Earth.
This is Earth, and the people or the animals who are in charge, their behavior has not changed either.
So is this where we're headed?
Have you ever read Penguin Island? It was written by a French gentleman, and it's a satire on human history. But it starts out with the world. How it started was that this French priest was very religious, and he called upon God to help him find more people that he could bring into the kingdom of God. And God and the devil got together, and the devil said to God, I bet you he'll go out and do exactly what they all do. And God said, oh, no, no, no. He's a man of God. And of course, the devil laughs. Anyway, the man of God gets into a stone trough, and he sails across the ocean, and he comes to, I would guess, say Antarctica, for example, and he sees all these penguins, and they're black and white. But he has very bad vision, and with the bright sun and everything, he thought they were unbaptized people. So in his arrogance, he went out and he baptized all the penguins as converts of Christianity. And the devil says, now what are you going to do? And so God says, I'll just make them human. So the penguins' forms evolve into different shapely men and women shapes. And the devil says, now this is interesting. They're all naked. So God said, well, I'll take care of that too. So he clothed them. But the problem was when he was clothing them, they started to develop shapes. And the men penguins got very interested in the women penguins. And I'll go out and get the book, borrow it from the library. I know that's an alien concept, going to the library, but take it out and read it, because at the end of the book, of course, civilization blows up, and then you see it recycle all over again. So man keeps on recycling in his behavior, never really learning,
I just
because
have one
he's too
question.
arrogant.
I have one question for you, Lillian. This
Yes.
book sounds fascinating, and I think I'm going to get it. But could you answer one question for me?
Yeah.
What's a library?
Oh, well, originally it was a place where you put a lot of books. But if you're like Julius Caesar, because you're trying to protect Cleopatra, his latest mistress, you burn it down by mistake. And that was the Great Library of Alexandria. Libraries are going to become, I guess, obsolete, because either we're going to go into Ray Bradbury's and burn all the books that certain state governors don't want kids to read because they'll make them too smart, and you got to keep on dumbing them down, or they'll be under lock and key because they're so sacred that only the few, like the politicians and the people of the church, can read them, because the rest of us will be so dumbed down that we will have to take their word over anybody else's. That's history, kids.
Yeah, point well taken. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we thank you very much for listening. And I was asked to put this tip out before we end today's program by our station manager, PWTRN, own Jeannie White. If you have parked your car and for some reason you cannot find it, and we all been there, we've lost our car, kids don't help, we have those clickers, right? So if you click on it, you will hear, depending on what kind of car you have, either the car honking or it will light up its headlights. That will help you find the car. Oh, and a side note, this morning I had to leave very early to take my grandson to school. If you click on the key with the clicker, it lights up the inside of the car, so you can tell it apart from all the other cars that look exactly like it. And one other thing, our call to action is this. We are mindful of what's happening in Israel. So if you are a rabbi or someone who is associated with what's happening in Israel, and let's face it, there are Americans who have been taken hostage, and the Hamas has made it part of war now that it's okay to rape women and girls, because it's war, folks. And you have any prayers, or you would like to say anything about what's going on in Israel and Hamas, please, we invite you to contact us here at PWR Network LLC at gmail.com and say, Lillian, I would like to appear on your program next week to talk about the Hamas Israel invasion. And please note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about Hamas. I'm not talking about the Palestinian people. I'm talking about a fanatical religious group. So Lisa, please provide your email to our audience.
Okay, but where do I get one of those clickers? I need one of those.
I got one with my car. I got two of them. And what it is, you should put these tiny little batteries in them. I mean, my grandson did it to me because naturally I couldn't figure it out. And he opened it up and he put the battery in, and you have a lock and an unlock. And you just aim it in the general direction and you click it. And it's like having the cell phone. All of a sudden you call on somebody else's cell phone to find your cell phone. Yes, that's how I find my cell phone in the house. I lose it all the time. So I get on my regular phone and I call up my phone number on the cell phone, and it starts ringing, and I don't put the receiver back on until I find it. You can laugh all you want, but it works.
Okay, so probably Amazon, I would think.
Yes, Amazon.
All right. Okay, so I invite anybody who's listening to send me an email if you'd like to have a discussion with me, if you'd like to submit comments or commentary to anything that I've shared today. I would love to hear from you. And you can send it to dementia whisperer and the number 1 at gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I will respond to anybody who would like to send me a message.
Mitz Wurzel with a Z.
Hi, I have a couple of things to say before you email. Lisa, I didn't know what Manifest Destiny was either, so don't feel bad. And Lillian, I have to laugh because I do that clicker to find my car. And I also use my house phone to find my cell phone when I can't find it. And I want to thank everyone for listening today. Do you have any comments about what I said? You can send it to Sloan, SLOAN, Betsy, BETSY, 31 at gmail.com. And I welcome your comments, commentary, whatever. Thank you.
We also now have the ability through Zoom to receive calls. So if you want to become part of the show, we will put together the instructions so that you can become part of the problem to help us become part of the solution. Again, PWR Network LLC at gmail.com. Go over to our website, passionateworldtalkradio.com, YouTube, YouTube, PWR Network, PW Talk Radio. And you can hear us there on linkedin.com/Lillian Cauldwell, facebook.com/Passionate World Radio, and all the usual directories. You cannot miss us. We occupy the first 10-15 pages between Betsy and Lisa and Jeannie and Dan Riley and I and Holly Brown. Trust me, you can find us. Just Google us. You will not find us in the public library, though. Alas, alas. So thank you very much for joining us. And remember, next Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, Lest with a T, We Forget -historical with hosts Lisa Skinner, Betsy Wurzel, and Lillian Cauldwell. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks for being here with us, everybody. We appreciate you.
Bye-bye.